All right, everybody. We're getting close to getting started. We're just doing some sound checks, making sure that everyone can hear. Looks like we got a few people already signed up. We're checking our sound. We good? Test, 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 test. All right, we're good. All right, we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. We're gonna let a few more people get on and we'll get started. So if you're out there, hang on. We will get going in a minute.
Cold.
Welcome, everybody, to our webinar, Health from Within by Discover Chiropractic. I'm Dr. Steve Sherry. Super excited about this webinar. This topic, I've been waiting to talk about this for a while. I've got two guests coming on. They're going to give us some good information. And so we've got about an hour together to go through this thing. So let's sit back and enjoy. Grab your notes. There's going to be a lot of information you want to write down as we go through this process. So just let you know, it's by Discover Chiropractic, and today it's going to be presented by myself, Dr. Steve Sherry, and my special guest will be Tammy Morton. I'll tell you more about her as we go along. I'm super excited to have her on board. She's going to bring some really interesting information about what she's doing in the field as we move through this. So just a quick reminder for those of you that are patients out there, our mission is we want to empower and let people live as long as they can. This is all about quality of life. And so for you who aren't patients, as a chiropractic office, we try to give as much health information as we can. Our whole idea is to make quality of life, people live longer and enjoy their times and have good times with their family. And unfortunately, most Americans nowadays are doing unhealthy things which cut their lives short. So really want to do that. Also, right now, when you listen to this, you start going, I can guarantee you every time we do a webinar, there's always people who come up and go, oh my gosh, my friend should have been on there. My husband should have listened to that, my wife. So right now we're starting out. Grab somebody who you think should be here and listening. This is going to be a good one. You don't want to have them miss it. So we're going to start out, we're going to be talking about what's called the gut biome tonight. And the gut biome is really important in the history. I'm going to share with you kind of the history of the gut biome, how we discovered it, what we're finding it does, and really some interesting information coming out. But first, let's talk about the human digestive system. That's the basic. And we learned this years and years, thousands of years ago. Human beings started figuring out that food goes in, gets digested, and becomes us. You know, there's that old saying, you are what you eat. And that is actually really true. You really are what you eat. One of the definitions of something that's living is that it absorbs food. And what that means is you'll actually eat, which kind of blows my mind, that you eat a product and it actually becomes you. And so we've known for a long time that the human digestive system is made up of the mouth, the salivary glands, the esophagus, the stomach, down to the intestines, the large intestines, the small intestines, all the way out. There's the appendix. We'll talk about that. There's some glands that help, the liver, the gallbladder, the pancreas, all play a big part in digesting food. Now, we've known that for a long time. We've known that food goes in. We know that it breaks it down. We'll talk about that a little bit more too, how it breaks into smaller and smaller particles, and then the body absorbs that and then uses that. But there were some interesting things about that digestive tract that we didn't know, that we actually have really just been discovering in the last 100 to 50 years that has actually changed our whole view of the digestive system. And one of those things is how it absorbs. So what you see on the screen there is a picture of the actual lining of the intestines. And one of the things is space and surface area is really important. So instead of just a straight tube, the food doesn't just go through a straight tube, it has all of these folds in it. And that's what you see on the screen there, all these folds. And the folds are designed to increase the surface area so that when the food products go through, there's more cells to interact with. Now, way back when we first looked at this, they knew there was a cell lining, and you can see it pointed to right there. You can also see that the blood is underneath that, the blood vessels, the lymph vessels. That's the system that the body's breaking these nutrients down to get into, but they have to get past this very important lining of cells. They're there to protect you from any toxins or anything that gets into your body. That lining is there to protect you, and those cells are tightly bound together to absorb the food and the products that it wants, but to keep out what it doesn't want. So what you see in that picture is actually the lining. And we've known it did that. What we didn't know is some very interesting facts about it, which is down in between the folds lives an entire garden of living organisms. Bacteria are actually all over inside of there. When we first looked at that, they didn't know that. They saw the folds, they looked at the cells under microscopes eventually, they realized that food had to pass through. What they didn't understand was that there was an entire living colony within our intestines. So let me tell you how this unfolded. The history of bacteria was first discovered by Antoine van Leeuwenhoek. He was a scientist who found bacteria. He first observed bacteria in the year 1676. He called them animalcules because he realized they were little living creatures that were moving around. Kind of was a big stir. People started looking more and more. And in the 1892s, we finally discovered viruses. So it took hundreds of years before we actually found viruses. They believed that bacteria, eventually by the 1800s, they viewed bacteria as the cause of all diseases. They started realizing that these little bugs would get into things, grow, ferment things. So they realized that these bacteria were actually really bad for human beings. So they decided that the bacteria were bad actors. That became what's known as the germ theory, which is if you get a bacteria who gets into you, you can become sick from that. That's kind of the story we all learned growing up, that bacteria and viruses were really, really bad for us, and they cause disease. Well, fast forward to now, we now know that the bacteria are actually really, really good for us. There's an entire world of bacteria inside of us that are actually our friends. They actually help us. There are thousands of different species in there that cover us and protect us. The body is actually covered in a micro world. There are trillions of bacteria and viruses in and around us every day. They help us by balancing out the micro world, and they're really key to our health, kind of like a garden, like I mentioned earlier. So when we take a look at the skin, for instance, the skin has been discovered to have trillions of bacteria all over us all the time. Kind of a weird thought when you think of it. We're covered with bacteria. So much so that if you took all of your human DNA away, in other words, all the cells that are you, there would still be an image of you sitting there. So if you see me right now on the camera, if you got rid of all of me, there's enough bacteria covering me on the outside and the inside that you would actually still see an image of Dr. Sherry sitting here. It took us years to figure out how important these bacteria and these funguses and viruses are to us. they make a big difference. For instance, on the skin, the picture that you see there is all the friendly bacteria which covers the skin. One of the jobs they do is they protect you from the unfriendly bacteria. See, this is one of the things with all the hand cleansers. When you sanitize your hand and kill out all the good bacteria, you basically leave an environment that is open to any bacteria that want to jump on your hand. You see, our friendly bacteria actually protect us, which is why they're there. They're there to leave a layer of protection so that bad bacteria can't get us and get infections. They play a part. We'll talk a little bit more about the skin microbiome in a bit here. Now, here's the real theme of tonight. What is the gut microbiome? Well, the human microbiome is composed of bacteria, as I've mentioned, yeast, fungus, and interestingly enough, viruses. That's right. Currently, you have millions and trillions of viruses that are inside of you. Now, the majority of them are just passing through. They don't affect us at all, but a lot of them play a role for us. It turns out that a lot of the viruses that live inside of your intestines actually are designed to attack bacteria, bad bacteria, that comes into your body. They invade that bad bacteria and they kill it. They're there to protect us, if you will, and they've learned that we give them a nice place to live. They offer us protection. Same with these bacteria. We have trillions of bacteria lining your intestines right now that are serving a huge purpose. In fact, there is more and now listen, when I read this was mind-blowing for me. There are more bacterial cells inside of you than human cells. Just think about that. In other words, you and I are more bacteria cells than we are human cells. There are about 4 trillion bacteria cells inside of a human being, and there's only about 30 trillion human cells. Interesting. There's up to 1,000 bacterial species, 1,000 different variations of bacteria line your insides right now. And it weighs a whopping 2 to 5 pounds. That's the same as your brain. When they started realizing this, researchers started thinking, wait a minute, this is different. This isn't just some bacteria. This is like a whole nother organ in the body. This is 40 trillion bacteria cells that are in your body that are there to protect you. And all of a sudden, a world to knowledge on diseases opened up. We started realizing there was a whole nother organ in the body known as the gut biome that is there to protect you and help you digest food. It turns out it interacts with the immune system. It interacts with almost all the healthy, and a lot of diseases now started pointing back even more to the way we eat and the way we treat it. So what do? Well, they fend off pathogenic microbes. When they come in, they defend us. They break down food. They stimulate our immune system. They synthesize vitamins. They make a series of the vitamins. They make the B vitamins and thiamine and ribone. They make vitamin K. All of those things help us clot blood. They are doing a ton of work for us in there, and we didn't even know they were there. In fact, many of you have been treating them very, very poorly, and you're reaping the benefits of not having a good, healthy biome. You're getting sick as a result. You're chasing it with different approaches with drugs and things, trying to figure out how to make it better when it's that biome or that garden inside of you. Let me give you an example. Most of us know about the appendix. We've all talked about appendicitis, and it can get swollen up and infected, and it can kill people. Appendicitis can be very deadly. You know, when I was growing up and went to school, they always were telling us that we didn't know what the appendix was. It was an old organ from years gone by, and nobody knows what it's for, and it was just sitting there. And, you know, one thing about chiropractic college I loved is we talked a lot about respecting the body and what made the body and why things were there, realizing that we were not as smart as the body was, that the human body did things for a reason. We also know that the human body operates under a law called the law of energy conservation, meaning it doesn't do silly things. It doesn't want to waste energy. It's very specific. So the question was, what is the appendix there? If you operate on that mindset, that the appendix can't just be some random organ that's just hanging out there for no reason, it had to be a cause, and it had to be a reason that it's there. Well, we think we know now. The appendix is actually a locker, a safe place for all of the microbiome to live. In fact, it's perfect. It's moist, it's warm. It's a great place to keep a backup of all these bacteria and viruses and funguses that live in us. In the event that something massive happens and the whole garden is wiped out, wouldn't it be a great idea to have some extra seeds lying around so you can repopulate? And boom, that's what we currently believe the appendix is. It's full of the good bacteria. Now, here's the problem. If you wipe those out and the bad bacteria can get in there, what a great place for a bacteria to reproduce. moist, it's warm, it's designed to help bacteria grow at a steady, healthy level. And a bad bacteria gets in and gets a hold of, and it can take off and rupture and kill people. Another clue, a fact as to why it is what it is. It's there to replenish that microbiome in your stomach, which serves such a huge purpose for us. Turns out the appendix is really important for our health. Let me give you an example of this. I came across this. What you see in the upper left is in Norway. It's a seed locker. It's just like the appendix. They've dug a hole. You can see there. They dug it into the permafrost in Norway. And guess what's being kept in there? They store all the seeds that they can find on this planet at a very cold temperature. And just in case something traumatic happens to our planet. If something wipes out a lot of vegetation or seeds, we can always go into the locker and replenish the things that were killed. Sounds a lot like our appendix to me. By the way, there's another one in the upper right there. You see a man opening a container. That's at Colorado State University. They also have a seed locker there. As human beings are smart enough to start putting seeds, just like our appendix. Best example I can have is how that appendix is functioning and how it's trying to replenish that really important microbiome in our stomach. Now, here's how we've been thinking about this. We're starting to figure out that the gut actually interacts with the brain. They dance together a lot. In fact, in the stomach, there are large amounts of serotonin made. And serotonin is a chemical that our nervous system uses to pass signals from one nerve to the other. In fact, serotonin is known as the happy neurotransmitter. When serotonin moves across, we find happiness. Isn't that interesting that serotonin, almost 70% of it is made in the stomach? Now, there's a lot of nerves down there that connect to the brain. It has a whole intrinsic nerve network down there around our gut. It's the only organ that really has that. It's like a separate little nerve. It's called our second brain, and it can function on its own almost. It interacts with the brain, but it's making all this serotonin, which really makes sense when you start thinking, oh, I could feel it in my gut, right? Or you get happy, you feel that giddiness in your stomach. Or more importantly, when you get really nervous, how you feel butterflies in your stomach. All of a sudden, all of those old comments that we made really start making sense when you realize there's a lot of the nerves in the stomach making neurotransmitters that play a part with the nervous system. Studies are currently showing there's connections between psychological disorders that from different species. Small numbers demonstrate that if you increase the microbiome, you make it healthy, things like depression and psychological disorders go away. All of these things are growing as we continue to do more research in this field. Gut immunity. We're learning more and more about how important the gut biome is to keeping our immune system functioning well. And it makes sense. So many things from the outside world are entering through our mouth. So the body has to have a good protection mechanism internally because these things are coming through here. It has to be working intimately with the immune system. Turns out gut microbiome goes down. Our immune system doesn't function very well either. If we start damaging these bacteria and these viruses and these funguses that are inside of our stomach, they can actually start to damage the lining. The cells themselves can start getting damaged, and we can start getting all kinds of immune problems from that. We call that condition leaky gut. Now, on this picture I put up for you, you can actually see some of the cells in a cartoon form that make up the lining of your intestines. You can see the cells are supposed to be close together and they make tight junctions. The tight junctions are designed so that things can't slip in between those cells. Those cells have those little finger projections up and they're interacting with things like glutens from breads that can cause problems for us, microorganisms, toxins, all those things that go in their body doesn't want. That layer is supposed to protect you from that. Unfortunately, if you kill off all the good bacteria, the good yeast and funguses, and the good viruses, we start damaging the cells. And here's where it gets really bad for us. Once the cells start getting damaged, they start shrinking. And the gaps between them open up. Thus the term leaky gut. It starts leaking into the blood system. You start getting gluten leaked in. You start getting those microorganisms leaked in. You start getting toxins leaked directly into the blood flow because the cells can't close the door. And leaky gut syndrome leads to a whole series of health problems. We're going to end up talking a little bit more about those. But I want you to understand that leaky gut is the end result. For instance, we know when people take antibiotics, leaky gut oftentimes will follow. It's a big problem in our culture, especially for small children who take a lot of antibiotics. They damage the lining, they get leaky gut, they develop all kinds of other health problems. Inflammation is a big one. You know, if you're going to release gluten, microorganisms, and toxins and things directly into the blood, the immune system is there to protect that. They're not supposed to be there, and the immune system will react to them aggressively right away when they enter. Thus, leaky gut can lead to some of the big inflammatory problems that we see in our culture. You know, if you get acute inflammation, as you can see, you know, you get injured, you fall, you get a laceration, you get some trauma, you get an allergic reaction or a burn or infection, you're going to get an acute inflammatory response. Pretty typical. But look at what inflammation does when it's chronic. When you have a leaky gut, you have a bad microbiome in your intestines aren't working properly. The cells have separated. Bad things are getting into the blood, creating a chronic inflammation going on inside your body. What does it lead to? Cardiovascular disease. We're going to talk about sugar in a little bit, how that does it. Autism's a side note. Rheumatoid arthritis, autoimmune diseases. The body starts attacking itself in some ways. Depression, we mentioned that one. Neurologic disorders, Alzheimer's, cancers. A lot of these chronic diseases, now we know more about the biome inside the gut, are being tied back to this massive dysfunction. That garden, you know, you're living with this garden of beings inside of you who are there to protect us. If you kill them off, it's bad. Now, if you go with my garden analogy, all of the microbiome represents the plants. The cells that line there, that's the garden dirt or the soil. It's one thing to kill off the plants. It's another thing if we start damaging the soil. If you start putting salt into the soil, you start damaging the soil, you get leaky gut and things get really, really bad, really, really fast. Now, I'd like to welcome a special guest. And I have been waiting to have this webinar with you guys so that we could have her join us. She is phenomenal. She's going to give us some really interesting comments about that. Her name is Tammy Morton. Tammy is a UC Davis grad. She has a master's degree in exercise physiology. And here's the exciting thing. She has over 25 years in clinical research. She's been involved in numerous research trials over the years. She taught clinical research at UC Santa Cruz for years. And currently, here's the big reason I had her come in. She's currently the head of clinical affairs at a company called Capsule. So I would like to welcome Tammy Morton to our webinar.
Hello.
I'm excited to have her. And I was talking to her a little about this before we brought her on, and she was just giving me a ton of great information about this. So Tammy, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
By the way, this is a big deal for Discover Chiropractic. You guys get to see Dr. Osborne a lot. You get to see me a lot. So it's kind of nice to see a better face come up here. So Tammy, if you wouldn't mind sharing what Capsule Vision does and what you're doing for Capsule Vision currently. I find it riveting what she's about to tell you guys.
Yeah, sure. So our company produces what's called a capsule endoscope. So a lot of times when people have problems with their gut, you go to a gastroenterologist and they'll stick a tube down your throat. And with the small intestine, as we know, it's so long, and even the colon, there's only so far you can penetrate into the small intestine, or by doing a colonoscopy so far that you can go in the other direction. And one of the challenges is sometimes you don't identify why people are having pain or bleeding or other diseases that you can't quite discover. So what Capsule Vision has is, on the market, we have a small bowel capsule. So we ran a study and showed that the capsule travels all the way through your system and takes pictures all the way through. So you get a video of everything that's going on in your gut. And from that, you can actually identify a lot of things that you can't see with an endoscope or with colonoscopy. And the great part about it is you don't have to have anesthesia. And so the small bowel capsule is on the market, and we're currently doing clinical trials for the colon capsule, which is kind of the next greatest thing, and certainly in today's day and age with COVID, to try to minimize the amount of contact and anesthesia and surgical procedures. We're hoping to get that on the market relatively soon.
So I got a few questions for you, because I know you guys are listening to that and what she's saying. What she's saying is they have a pill that has cameras inside of it that you swallow, and it goes all the way through and takes pictures all the way through.
Yep.
I'm going to ask the question they want to know. How big's the pill?
It's about the size of my pinky.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually did take the small bowel capsule, and I don't like ingesting pills, but I was able to swallow that one. And the colon capsule that's in clinical trials right now, it's a little bit bigger, but nobody's had a problem swallowing it. People actually find it to be super easy to swallow.
The thing I think that's so cool about it too is, like, so if you do a colonoscopy, you basically are getting an image of the large intestines. Mm-hmm. Basically, this pill is getting like pictures. I assume it comes on does it come on right away when you swallow it, or how does that work? Does it start taking pictures?
Yeah.
Where?
So as a matter of fact, for the small bowel indication, we have different frame rates, and the rates that they capture the frames go differently depending on what we're trying to capture. If you're trying to capture small bowel, it starts capturing images faster than if we're looking for colon. However, you do capture images all the way through, just like Dr. Sherry said.
So it's kind of cool. So you can take the pill and you're getting not only just like a colonoscopy eventually, right? Not just the big intestines, but you're getting looked at like all the way through basically.
Yeah. And if you have a problem swallowing it, which I did, you pop it in your mouth and you start to swallow it and you gag a little bit. So you see it come back up and then you see it go back down.
So you get footage of the in and out.
You get everything. Yeah.
Well, that's great. So, okay. So that's obviously, you kind of started in that. That's not the first time you've done research on something like that. You've done other jobs, but on this one, when you got in this company and started this process, that's kind of when you got introduced more to like intestinal gut flora, those
gut disease and issues. And when I was first learning about the small bowel diseases and the things that gastroenterologists were discovering, I remember being at UMass and then talking to the gastroenterologist there that was participating in our clinical trial. And we were just talking about various things. And he talked about the gut biome. And I thought, wow, I don't really know much about that. This was probably 8-10 years ago at the time. And then he mentioned to me the words fecal transplant. And I thought, what is that?
Everyone just pause and process because that's a tough one to listen to.
Transplant.
Yeah.
And I thought that sounds kind of disgusting, actually. Heart transplant, lung transplant, liver transplant, those I'm on board with, but fecal transplant. And then I asked, what is that? So people who have completely depleted gut biomes, who are in a very bad state of affairs, or dealing with an overgrowth of, particularly hospital patients get what's called C. diff, which is a very resistant bacteria, and it often comes on as a result of antibiotics. One of the ways to fight C. diff overgrowth is a fecal transplant, which is taking the healthy biome from somebody who has healthy stool and transplanting that into another a diseased patient.
In some levels, it sounds horrible, right?
I thought it sounded disgusting.
It sounds.
I don't want any part of that.
Disgusting, but like, I guess though, if you can get rid of like that first opinion or that first view, right? If you can get past the oh my god, if you can get to the next layer of like, it makes sense. Like I was just using the analogy. You probably heard me say this about. It's like a garden, right? And all these living little creatures are inside of us, and if you wipe them out, you really do, especially if that appendix doesn't function right or doesn't redo it. Replanting those is hugely important. I mean, we're going to talk a little more about that, but like, you want to reseed that, and I think what you mentioned is so important. These aren't like your average people who end up getting that.
These are sick people. I mean, this is not something that happens on a regular basis. These are very sick people.
I find it interesting that when we consider that we've really been working with a microbiome for about 100 years, we've gotten to a point now where it is so important that we'll do that procedure to drastically help people. And I think the research is getting stronger and stronger that this microbiome, we are not taking care of our internal garden very well. And the devastating effects on health are just amazing. I know you probably looked into some of this too, but some of the research that's coming out, it's kind of mind-boggling, basically. So talk to me, if you will. I know you've got your story I'd like to hear a little about too, but we had mentioned before we came on, what damages so for people out there who are like learning this for the first time and they're thinking maybe how do I know my microbiome's good or not good? What are the damaging effects if you don't have a good microbiome? What damages it?
So unfortunately, the Western diet, which we all know is not necessarily the best on the planet, is a huge problem with the microbiome. We have a lot of processed foods. People drink alcohol. Sugar is a terrible one. Artificial sweeteners, but also lifestyle, too little sleep, stress, use of antibiotics, parasites. We don't really necessarily think too much about parasites here in the U.S. Some third world countries may be a bigger issue, but disease, chronic diseases like diabetes, chronic inflammation, it really wreaks havoc on the gut microbiome.
The thing that's crazy is I listened to that list, and it literally is like everything that we talk about in our office. It's like you just went down like the top 10 diseases in America, basically, right? I mean, cardiovascular disease, you talked, and what I find interesting is that those things that you just mentioned that create these problems are all the things we know don't help us.
No,
right? Like
none of it helps us.
High sugar, really bad, right? Like the alcohol. It's weird. When I hear you say alcohol, you think of like the people who drink on a regular basis. alcohol is what we kill things with. So
Yeah.
if we're drinking alcohol into our system, and while sure it can absorb into us and create the effects in our brain, which are damaging, but it's actually kind of just killing the garden. That'd be like going out and saying, you know what I'm gonna do? Don't mind me. I'm gonna go out and salt the garden tonight.
Yeah.
You know, I'm gonna pour salt in the garden, it's one thing if you want to salt the garden a little bit one day, but imagine going out and salting the garden every single day.
And it's the totality of all of those things together, right? So if you have a processed diet, a high sugar diet, low fiber diet, you don't sleep well enough, you're stressed out all the time, you're drinking to deal with anxiety or depression, you're just compounding the issue. So it's really all of those things. And then, you know, certainly as we age, those become, you know, the manifestations of that.
Yeah. You know, what's funny.
People end up taking capsules to find out what's going on with their gut.
Yeah, as I hear you say that, that list of stuff you just said, like, okay, the bad American diet, the high sugar, the alcohol, you know, like you went down and all my head is thinking, yeah, that's not healthy. None of that's healthy. No. None of that should be a surprise to anybody, right? Like you just listed 6 things that we all know are unhealthy. And oh, interestingly, they all kill the gut biome.
Yes.
Like it's almost like a no-brainer in that level, right? Okay, so now as people out here are hearing this and they're thinking about their own patterns and their own habits and things they've done that might be damaging the gut biome, what are the symptoms? Because you don't always know, we can't test them. I can't look inside and see how the garden's growing. What are the symptoms that we start getting as the gut biome gets damaged? And if we start getting to the leaky gut, which is damaging the actual, the soil, if you will,
Right.
What kind of symptoms do people
So
get?
some of the real obvious ones are directly related to the gut. So bloating, constipation, diarrhea, you know, gas, belching. Some people start getting pain. H. pylori is a bacteria that when it grows, people get ulcers. So those are the very obvious things. But then there are some ones that some people wouldn't necessarily attribute to my gut biome being out of balance. Depression, anxiety, which you already talked about.
Mm-hmm.
You don't look at that with a capsule. We also talk about sleep disturbances are also a very big one. But you know, they usually start to manifest and start to show you symptoms when you have pain or some gastrointestinal upset.
Do you know, and I hope you have the answer for this one, how do we test that? Is there a way we can test the microbiome?
Yeah. I mean, you can test for chronic inflammation. There's lots of different things. And, you know, there's immunoresponses to inflammation, which my own personal issue with this, you know, as you know, I was a vegetarian for many, many years. And my holdout was I could never give up cheese because I love cheese so much. Well, then it turns out I started having issues that manifested with digestive upset symptoms, and not just, you know, maybe a little gas here and there. It was doubled over in pain. And then running the blood test, it turned out that my biggest inflammatory markers were dairy and eggs. Those were my last holdouts before, you know, that was like, okay, I'm vegetarian, but I can eat these. I could no longer tolerate those. So, you know, that's
you know,
kind of the manifestation of it.
As I was getting ready for this webinar, I was reading up on some of the first findings as they were discovering this back in like the 1800s. There was a researcher in France, I believe, and what he found was in babies, he found a certain bacteria. And before that, they had always thought that, of course, it was totally sterile, you know, because remember, that was operating on that old system of like bacteria or bad bacteria. Anytime there's a bacteria, you get infection. So he was finding the certain bacteria in babies that were sick. So he started looking at healthy babies and he found that bacteria in them as well. And that kind of opens the door to this process as they start discovering this. Well, it turns out that bacteria is actually in mother's milk.
Yep.
So it's being passed to the baby. Well, here's the cool thing about that bacteria. It actually helps you digest the sugars inside of mother's milk. So since then, we've learned a ton that a lot of the babies have bacteria in them already, that they're basically the mother is handing over the seeds, if you will, to start that garden inside, which plays a huge role. I mean, I can't tell you how important this is going to be. I think it's going to get bigger and bigger as we learn more and more about it. Now, once we discover we can get tested or what it's like, we have the symptoms, we might get tested to take a look. What things do we have to say replenish the microbiome? What kind of things are out there that we can do to help this?
Yeah, so one of the first things you can do is obviously cut out refined sugar. I mean, we all know that refined sugar is bad for you for a lot of reasons, but the really interesting thing is there's good bacteria and bad bacteria in your gut, as Dr. Sherry pointed out, and the bad bacteria love sugar, love it. The good bacteria, they don't eat the sugar. They actually digest and consume for growth, which you want proliferation or the growth of all of these wonderful bacteria. You want that. So what do you need to do? When your parents told you to eat your vegetables and all the old wives' tales that you need to eat your vegetables, well, there's a reason for it. Plant-based fiber is exactly the prebiotic or food for the gut microbiome of the probiotics in your gut from your stomach all the way through your colon.
Now, you just said a word there that I want to go back to a minute. So antibiotics are exactly what they say. They kill. Now, a lot of people will take them, and are antibiotics specifically for a certain bacteria?
So there's broad spectrum antibiotics. So if you go to an MD and they say, well, we think you have bacterial infection, but they don't really know what it is because there's a ton of bacteria out there. Sometimes you'll get a broad spectrum antibiotic, and that will kill a broad spectrum of bacteria, not everything necessarily. And then sometimes there are bacteria or antibiotics that are specific, like you wouldn't give somebody with a sinus infection necessarily the same antibiotic that you would give for a urinary tract infection. So there can be specifics, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's only going to target that one bacteria. You're going to get a bacterial strain death of many because we just don't have specifics quite like that.
So those can go in. The antibacterial things will kill the
bacteria.
All of them.
Good, bad, ugly.
Now, I want to get my other question. We know probiotics, which we're going to talk about more, are what go in and try to repopulate. That's what the but you said prebiotics. Was that a mistake, or is there such a thing as prebiotics?
No, I do make plenty of mistakes, but no, that was not a mistake. Prebiotic is basically the food for the gut bacteria.
Fertilizer.
Yes.
Fertilizer for the garden.
Yes, and fiber, anything that has plant-based fiber is fantastic for your gut. So now some have more fiber than others. And so I encourage people, having had to go through this my own self, there's some vegetables that I can't tolerate because there's too much fiber. And, so people switching over or trying to get their gut in balance, there's going to be some hits and misses. So don't be surprised if, oh my God, I'm eating all these vegetables and I feel worse now, or I'm bloated more now. Yep, you have a lot of fiber in your system now.
I find it so interesting in my mind as I start viewing the intestines and the digestive system more than just, oh, I'm eating a food, it's absorbing it. It literally is a garden. And I literally need to feed the garden, not just myself. Like, I need to be thinking like, hey, I've got to take in nutrients for my own body, but by golly, I've got to be giving fertilizer and taking care of my own garden because I've got a whole little living city. In fact, like I said in the beginning, there's more of those cells that I need to take care of than my own cells, which play a huge role for us. Good. So I have one more question before we let you go. I'm dying to know this. You mentioned sugar. We talk a ton about sugar. Almost every workshop we do, we talk about how human beings are drawn towards sugar. I talked not too long ago about addictions to sugar. I'm always want to know, what are the actual dynamics? What's the actual mechanism of sugar, simple sugars that go in, all the added sugars that we get in our foods? What's the actual mechanism in the microbiome? What actually happens?
What it does is so people who tend to eat sugar or have high sugar diets tend to be low in fiber. So what you've done is you've jacked up the food for the bad bacteria to consume and grow. They're super happy. They're so excited. It's like kids with cookies, right? Oh my God, I have all this food at my disposal. And the good bacteria is not going to consume that sugar. So the good bacteria are going to die and the bad bacteria are going to proliferate or grow more and more colonies. So then you're completely out of balance.
So again, the bad like it.
So dropping that sugar, eating fermented foods, sauerkraut. Now fermented foods, not fermented grapes, not wine, because that's alcohol. Yeah. But fermented foods, kombucha, like there's a lot of products on the market nowadays because people are discovering the importance of the gut biome.
So one of the things I've noticed too is you'll hear as this word and this information gets out to people, there's this, eat yogurt. And one of the things I think people mess up is that what I mentioned in the beginning, there are thousands of different species of these bacteria, and yogurt may only have a handful of them.
Yeah, yogurt.
You can't get them all from just yogurt.
Yeah, yogurt has a few, and for a long time before much was known about, bacterial strains and how important they were to us, a lot of people said, eat yogurt. There's a lot of bacterial strains. Well, first of all, I want to point out that yogurt is from cows, and cows make bacterial strains for other cows. So it's my own personal recommendation that people really not consume dairy as a source of probiotics, because there's a whole host of other inflammatory things that can happen while consuming dairy. So my own personal experience, because God knows I loved dairy.
Yeah, I'm fairly anti-dairy. I mean, it's a product made to make young cows into or young into making a big cow. It's not. And if you look at the ratio of protein and carbohydrates, it's completely different than our own mother's milk. So I agree 100%. Yeah. Well, I'm going to let you go. Okay, that was awesome. Thank you very much for joining us. We're going to try to do this again. I'm going to try to get her to come more because she's really smart and we need smart people on it. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, now we're moving to a next level. I have to grab on to my next slide here. I can't tell you how grateful I was to have her there. So when we start talking about like what can we do to help the microbiome? Now, Tammy mentioned there's going to be things you take like feeding. I just love that example, by the way, of feeding the garden, right? Like eating the fibers that feed the good ones. And man, every time I do a webinar and I spend time preparing for it, I'm always blown away by what I learn. I know that sugar is not good for us. And you go through the whole thing about your sugar levels in your blood go up and stuff. I never knew that sugar at that level was feeding the weeds in my garden. I never contemplated that. And now I know it just changes my mindset. I'm realizing now eating those simple sugars are just feeding the bad bacteria in my stomach, and it's killing off all the plants in the garden that I want, and it's growing weeds. It's a mind blower for me. Now, under the 5 essentials, as patients here, we operate on the 5 essentials of health. Chiropractic. Where does chiropractic fit in this? Well, we know the nervous system runs this whole system. One of the hottest areas to get adjusted are right where the nerves are that go to our intestines, in the low back and the upper back. So we always want to keep that adjusted. We want to keep good posture. The last thing you want to do is have a healthy garden, but the nervous system's not able to maintain it. That becomes a problem. So chiropractically, it's super important that we get you on regularly, keeping your rhythm going in our office. I've had a lot of people come in, they get adjusted for 4, 5, 6 months. They do great. Their health could go along, their stomach problems, we've got them under control. And then they disappear, only to show up about a year or 6 months later, all their symptoms would come back. And I always tell them the same thing. I told you so. You got to stay consistent. All of these things we're talking about consistent, but that chiropractic model of maintaining that nervous system is really the core beginning of making sure this system works. Toxins. I mentioned toxins. Toxins go into us. They're not supposed to be. Here's the problem. You got this great system. You got this great garden. They all are designed to have, the food products in there, the proteins, the fats, the sugars. Those things are designed. The carbohydrates are designed to be in there. The body can deal with that. Toxins were not. You're introducing a substance the body was never designed to have, and it can wreak havoc on us. And unfortunately, in our world, toxins are everywhere. So make sure you're looking around. You got to start looking. We've done workshops on this before. Look at the toxins and start limiting them because they're killing your garden. They're just pouring poison into the garden inside of you. Exercise. Tammy mentioned that. Exercise is hugely important. We do a lot of surge training here. We've done workshops on surge. You've got to be exercising. There's hands down. When you exercise, your body's happy. When you don't exercise, your body's not happy and things will break down. You've got to be out moving and exercising. And that doesn't mean, when I talk to people, that doesn't always mean you have to put on the headband and the leg warmers and go out and do all this crazy stuff. Studies show just walking 20 minutes a day, just getting out and walking every day makes a huge difference in our health. So I'm not asking you to buy a workout set and lift in the garage, although it's great. I do recommend you got to minimum every day. You got to go for a walk and try to get about a 20-minute walk every day. That's a minimum if you want to stay healthy. Stress, a big one. Tammy mentioned it. I think I mentioned it briefly. Stress is a tough one in our society. It's everywhere. Again, I did a stress workshop not too long ago. You should be able to find it on our network here. Talked about the damaging effects of stress. One of the things that happens under stress is our body responds massively, and it thinks it's being attacked by a tiger. That's what I always tell people. If you want to know how stress works, think of what your body would do if a tiger was attacking you. Well, one thing it would do is it wouldn't care about the garden. Let me give an example. In my backyard, I have a garden. I love taking care of it. We water it. We've got the water lines hooked up. We take care of it. Trust me, if someone was attacking my house, I wouldn't care about the garden anymore. That's how your brain thinks of it. If you're being attacked by a tiger, maintaining the internal garden is not a priority. You'll deal with that later. So stress is a big one for us. How to reduce stress in your life is important. We've talked about that on other workshops. Trying to avoid it, but it's how you handle it. Guess what one of the number one things are for stress? Exercise. I can go right back to my other slide. Exercise is one of the big ones to reduce stress effects in our body, and that's why I want you out walking at least 20 minutes every day. Now, causes of poor nutrition and gut health we've mentioned, and that's some of the poor nutrition things where we're eating the wrong things. I cannot stress to you guys, you know, if you look at just the health problems, I get it. But now this hopefully gives you a different view of what poor nutrition is doing. Eating those wrong fats, consuming those high sugar diets, the alcohols, those things are just damaging our bodies from the inside. They're just killing that garden. So the gut health diet, what is it? Well, you got to avoid the bad things. You got to replenish the good things like Tammy was mentioning, and supplement. Supplements is what we're going to talk about now. All of these things, it's a big picture. That's a short amount of time. If you have questions, feel free to ask myself or Dr. Osborne when you come in, or Dr. Dawes. We'd be glad to help you out. But I'm hoping that this webinar really gets you thinking about a different way about your health. Now, we're going to talk about some of the things that we have, and one of the main ones is the probiotics. When I first started practice, they didn't even teach us about probiotics, hardly at all. Then I started learning about probiotics in the world that said, when somebody takes antibiotics and they kill off the good bacteria, you want to replant the good bacteria. I remember thinking, well, that makes sense. But I didn't want to give them to them while they're taking the antibiotics. So when they first told us, they said, if a person takes antibiotics, you should give them probiotics. And the probiotics are the good bacteria, the good strains, as many of the good strains as we can get to repopulate inside. But don't do it while they're taking antibiotics. Guess what? Things have changed. I've been in practice for 25 years. Now they're telling us, no. As soon as someone starts taking antibiotics, you should start giving them the good bacteria. Start right away. Why wait? Give it to them. Give them to them. Well, it's even gone beyond that. Now people with these bad diets and these chronic stress and things, I have people taking probiotics all the time. It's no longer a short-term fix thing. This is an ongoing process because of the way we're living and dieting. We're killing these things on a regular basis. So a lot of people are finding benefits of just constantly replacing with the probiotics. But remember what Tammy said, I love that prebiotic. You got to give it the fertilizer. Otherwise, you're just throwing seeds out on a dry field. You got to be giving it the right world. So it's got a prebiotics and the probiotics. And we're going to bring up, I love who we're about to bring up. You guys all know who she is. Alyssa from our office, our CA, who helps us out here, is going to come out, and she is going to walk through what we have at the office. All right, so Alyssa is here for us. Let me turn around. She's made her way back up here. There she is.
That's supposed to be me right there.
That is you.
Wow,
but that was
nice
you.
of you.
Thank you. That's you. Look at, you're smart. You're funny. I thought that was good. You're caring, strong-willed. I know she's strong-willed, and she's very perceptive and clever. I just had your hair cut a little bit shorter.
That's okay. We'll just pretend.
All right, so we're going to talk about what we have at the office as far as the gut. Like, what do we offer? We get that question sometimes. People come in, they have gut problems. They go, what do you recommend? What do we do? So let's go through these. And Alyssa's going to tell us what the Max GI product is that we have.
Yes. I also just want to start before we go over these supplements that something that Dr. Osborne always says is you can't supplement for a bad lifestyle.
I like that one.
So, you know, you could take these supplements all day long, but like Tammy and Dr. Sherry were saying, you have to, you know, eat your veggies.
Yeah.
Okay. So the Max GI, that's actually our basic probiotic, just a basic one, everybody, every day. Just to help balance and get those pre and probiotics.
So this is the one that, in fact, I think there's a couple of bundles you're going to talk about. This is like the basic level. So if you guys are out there and you're thinking, I think I'm doing pretty good, this is the beginning one, is what you're saying, right?
Yes.
This is the one that we all will be taking. This just gets you repopulating that garden.
Exactly.
Okay, good.
Exactly. So the next one is actually L-glutamine. And L-glutamine is really cool. And this one actually really helped me a ton when I was on a protocol, which I'll talk about in a little bit. It's the most abundant amino acid that you can take. So it's like the building blocks to proteins, and it's major fuel source for proper intestine function.
Yeah, so glutamine is really important. So when I was talking about the cells earlier and how they're together, glutamine is part of that process. So if you kill off the microbiome and you start to damage the soil, you know, the cell lining starts getting damaged and we start getting leaky gut, this one is hugely important because it plays a part in bringing those cells back together and closing up those leaky gaps. So this is a big one.
Yeah, this one made a big difference in my protocol as well. The next one is actually the fiber. So of course, fiber is super important, as we've been talking about. So during a time where you're trying to get back on track with your gut health, taking a extra boost of fiber during your day in your smoothie, whatever it is, it's unflavored, will really help kind of catapult you into that next level.
How do you take this one, by the way? Is this a blend? What is that?
Yeah, so it's actually a powder. It's unflavored, so it tastes like nothing. It's white. You can throw it in a smoothie. You can throw it in a juice if you're making like a green juice. You can drink it straight just with water in a tiny little glass and kind of take it like a little fiber shot.
So I've actually never had this. So when it says unflavored, I know, like, I've had stuff quote unflavored, but it still has a taste.
Right,
Have you had this one?
I have not actually had this one, but if it, you can smell it, I guess, before, and put some lemon juice in it too. But if you're mixing it with some things, usually it'll be masked. Okay. The next one that we have is actually our high potency probiotic. So this is 50 billion probiotic, and this one is good for anybody who's just starting out, like if you're in crisis. If you're vegan, actually a fun fact, the first probiotic we discussed, the Max GI, has egg in it, or a derivative from egg. This one is completely dairy free. So I personally take this one on a daily basis, but you can take it just to start out with and then transition to the other one as well. So
this one is what we'll do a lot with. This one is when you get someone who's just like Alyssa was saying, when you get someone who's just starting, or if someone's in crisis, they have symptoms and stuff, this is often the one we will use for a month or two to really try to load them up. And then roll them back to maybe the Max GI. But I think Alyssa just said it. I've had some people who just, this is what they take. I've had people take the 50B, do well, you try to move them to Max GI, and it doesn't work. They go right back to the 50B. So ideally, it's used more as like a hit you hard and then get you steady, but sometimes you just stay on the 50B.
Exactly. And then we have the last one, which is actually a compilation of herbs and oils and different nutrients that help just with the GI tract in general. So it's like that extra boost there, especially like I said, with the fiber. If you're starting out, you kind of want to catapult yourself, build that momentum, build all that good probiotic.
So this one, for out there, it's just full of a whole series of products, nutritional things that help the gut. They help clean out the gut. They help the binds and everything. I have a question for you though. There are 2 containers there.
There are.
Why?
So it comes in 2 different forms. Some people don't like to take capsules, and so a lot of companies will make powders as well. So that's this one is that. It's peach flavored, the powder. The capsules obviously don't taste like anything. I personally would say take the powder. I've actually had this before, and it's really delicious with just water, or if you make like a fruit smoothie. The capsules, you have to take about 7 of them a day. So it's not always most convenient.
That's a lot of cameras going down your gut.
Yes, it is. That's
that's a lot of cameras.
But if you don't like the taste of powder, or that's not really your thing and you don't mind, then that's always there for you as well. So it's personal choice, really.
Okay.
Yes, so this is the bundle that we're recommending as far as to get started. So this has all of the supplements that I just went through, but there's actually 3 different types of bundles. So this bundle that you're seeing right here is like the optimal, the large package. This would be really great for anybody who's in crisis, or if you're just determined and ready to get started, that this is the option that you want to go with. The other 2 options, which I will have links for everything in the comments to the store and all of that, so that you can click on that. But the other 2 bundles is a basic one. It's the 2 probiotics, the Max GI and the 50B, and they have a protocol of how to take it together. And that's a really good one, just if you want to like dip your toes and kind of see how you feel with the probiotics in general. And how your body reacts to them, because everybody reacts to them differently. And number 2, the second bundle, is going to be the 2 probiotics that I just mentioned, and then also the L-glutamine. So as Dr. Sherry was saying, the L-glutamine is extremely important, especially with leaky gut. And so they added that one in there as well. And it's an easy powder to take, really, really simple. And what's cool is this bundle that I'm speaking of right now comes with a recipe book. So it's a gut healing recipe book if you purchase it. And this is all online. And then, of course, the third bundle is the one we're looking at, and it also comes with that amazing recipe book.
Okay, so question for you. What's the advantage of buying a bundle as opposed to buying them independently?
Okay, yes. So buying a bundle, you're going to get a discount on them, especially online right now. They're doing a lot of things with shipping. I do want to just add our website's under construction until Monday. So I will drop the link of where to go, but you can try doing it. I'm not sure if they've already shut it down yet, but save that link for Monday and log on then.
Right. Or you can always ask in the office.
Yes, so we actually aren't carrying every single one of these in the office, but I will tell you we do have the 2 probiotics and the L-glutamine available.
So just to recap really quick, there's the small bundle, which is kind of the beginner. It's the 2 items. Then there's the middle bundle with the cookbook and everything. And then there's this bigger bundle.
Exactly.
This bigger bundle, by the way, I'd recommend, like, if you're having issues and you're like, this sounds like I need to be on this, you know, Tammy did a lot of talk about professionally things and everything, but I can tell you her personal story is probiotics really changed her health, like really dramatically changed her health. Which brings me to another question, which I know, Alyssa, you've had, when this topic came up, you were excited to go through it because I think you had a personal experience with probiotics. So if you don't mind, I would like you to kind of share your story because it's a little bit different than what Tammy had.
Yeah, so I've had digestive issues since I can remember. My whole entire life, and maybe that's something that comes from your parents' health as well, right? That
Could be, yep.
Can determine it. And so my mom would take me to doctors, and they'd say, you know, obviously add more fiber in, do this, do that, and it never really got resolved. So as I became a teenager, I started to feel more effects of this. And I was having skin issues. Most common for me was I had really bad acne. I also had eczema, and I would get random reactions to foods sometimes. And so it was very frustrating, especially as a teenager, you know, going through high school, you're finding yourself and you don't really want to have to deal with all those ailments. So I would go to the doctor, they'd have me try all these different types of creams and topical ointments. Finally, I just got fed up and I was like, just give me something to take and get rid of this acne, get rid of these problems. And they gave me a antibiotic, which is interesting because of everything that we've been talking about. Yeah. And my acne did go away. But about 8 months into this protocol my doctor had me on, I began to get these reactions where on my chest I would have an outbreak of something in between a rash and acne. Sorry if that's too much information, but this really does happen. And I freaked out. I was in hair school at the time, and that's all I can think about. So I came here and I talked to Dr. Osborne, and he said, you know, you need to get on a protocol. You need to heal your gut because the skin is our biggest organ. And a lot of skin issues can be caused by gut health or lack thereof. So I went on this protocol, which is very similar to the bundle that you're looking at right now. Of course, this was 4 years ago or so. So we've updated these supplements. They've done new research. So yeah,
So I'm going to question for you. So you were on the protocol he gave you is similar to what we can see on the screen here.
Yes.
How long, like if you were to tell someone out there's like, oh my gosh, I had the same thing. Hey, by the way, did you guys notice that it was a skin issue where that there's a skin microbiome there, and we're talking about the gut biome, but clearly there's something dancing there too.
Yeah.
How long when you started taking it, like how long did you get results?
Well, I started the protocol right away, and I will tell you that my rash on my chest and that was going down my back went away within 3 days.
Oh,
I was amazed because I had this outbreak and it was
Mm-hmm.
getting worse and worse and spreading for about 2 months.
Yeah, that's pretty fast.
2 months.
That's good.
And so 3 days, it completely started to clear up. A week later, it was completely gone. And I was already feeling better by that time too, within those 3 days being on that protocol.
Yeah.
And of course, I did change my diet as well, which I think really helped too.
Yeah, I over the years I've noticed the probiotics actually have a pretty fast. I mean, I think it's a fairly sensitive area, and I think you just start repopulating, the body almost like takes a big breath and goes, "Oh, good,
Yeah.
The good bacteria are back."
Yeah.
So you were obviously surprised about how quickly it happened. Was the protocol? Last question for you: was the protocol easy to do, or did you find it? You know, sometimes we give patients things that I think are hard, lifestyle changes that are hard, and it works hard. Was that bundle or protocol? If someone's out there watching saying I should probably try that, was it hard to do?
For me, it wasn't hard because I was determined to get rid of what was happening with me, and I would do anything at that point. So I think if you know yourself, you can start small, like with the first bundle. But if you're determined, you're ready, and you want to feel good, you want to look good, and you want your digestion to be optimal, I think just jump in, get on it, and do what you got to do. Awesome.
Okay, and then there's one more thing that we put on that we do have here, the daily essentials, and I added this because for some of you that haven't known, the Max Living has come out with their daily essentials. They're small packets of these. They don't have all the GI things in them, but I take one of these every day. It's a small packet that has the omega-3 fatty acids. We can talk about that at all tonight. And it's just a good basic everyday thing to take that's also here in the office. So Alyssa, thank you very much for coming. I appreciate that. That was fabulous. I have to say, preparing for this webinar was a lot easier knowing that I was going to have two wonderful people helping me who are really knowledgeable, and both of them spent some time getting ready to come on here and help you guys. And I really appreciate them both jumping in and gave Dr. Osborne a day off so he could kind of relax and go over this topic. And I think what I wanted to do today was just spend about an hour, and we're right at that point. And I just wanted to give you guys the idea of what the gut biome is. And I really wanted to put into how big a deal the gut biome seems to be. I think if you were able to get in a time machine and flash forward, 50 to 100 years, I think you'd find out that diets are dramatically different. The way we treat people will be dramatically different, because I think this is the ground zero. I think we've been learning more and more about it, and we're finding out how important it is. I think if you flashed forward in years, you would look back and go, I can't believe we ever ate the way we ate. We look at some of the old medical procedures from the 1800s and we think, oh my gosh, I can't believe they ever did that. I'm fairly convinced, reading all the studies I read over the last couple of weeks getting ready for this, human beings will be eating different, and the human gut biome will become an absolutely huge part of our health. So quick action steps for today as we wrap up. Make sure you keep the rhythm up on those adjustments, keeping that spine healthy, super crucial. Exercise, I want you out walking. Clean up those toxins immediately. There's no room for the toxins to be ruining the garden ground. Eat living food. What I mean by that is eating living food, things like apples and broccoli, things that if you plant will grow. A lot of fiber in there. You want those things. Eat living food. It's crucial for us. Dead foods are dead foods like M&Ms and candy bars and things that are dead. They don't seem to do as well as living food in our body. Reduce and deal with life stressors. How you handle the stressors are important, or get rid of them as much as you can. Those are the main action steps that I want you to get out of this. And by all means, if you're interested, you need to get on a probiotic right now and make sure, like Tammy was talking about, the prebiotic, the fibers and things need to be in there. You can't just answer this. You cannot answer these problems with the probiotics by just throwing seeds out into the garden and hoping they grow. You're going to have to give them a soil. You're going to have to water them. You're going to have to take care of them. We all have a garden inside of us, and we've got to start taking care of it. It's crucial for our health. Now, quick reminder on some upcoming events. I went after Alyssa and I said, you got to tell me what we have coming up. What do we have coming up? Here's what she let me know. She wrote them down so great for me. The things that we have coming up are on Thursday, 8/6, we have a Better Results Faster. It's an online webinar. I did it last month. So on August 6th is the Better Results Faster. If you've never watched the Better Results class, you should do it. It's basically designed to help you do the 5 essentials and give you some tips. I love teaching it. I don't know who's going to teach it on the 6th, but don't miss that. There are more events coming. We don't have titles yet, but clearly we'll have something in August, another webinar on some fabulous topic. So make sure you check in on your Monday emails that we send out. The office calendar's done here. Alyssa takes care of that. She does a great job. So you can check that when you come in. But don't miss that. These webinars give a ton of information. I know we spend a lot of time prepping them for you guys. Also, make sure you connect to us. A lot of people have been doing this. We make sure you're on the Monday email list. We send those out. Join and like us on our Facebook page. We also have a private Facebook page known as the Tribe. You have to join that one. The other Discover Chiropractic page you can just like and you'll see everything. But the Tribe you want to join, you get it cleared to get in. We give a lot of information through that all the time. We like to keep everyone kind of tight and you hear a lot of information. So make sure you do those things. Guys, I appreciate the time. We got about an hour. I hope you learned about the microbiome. I really appreciated having them come in, Tammy and Alyssa come in and talk. I thought it was great. I'll see you guys at the office. Good health.